How you been, Rabbi?
Baruch Hashem good. Baruch Hashem good.
Good, good. I miss you. I'm moving to the valley in the next 2 weeks, and I finally got the Rashi.
Okay, let's get started. Um, Good Vach. We're just now coming from Shabbos, Parshas Va'era, and the anniversary of the passing of the Alter Rebbe, day before, on the 24th of Teves. And there's actually a very deep connection between the Alter Rebbe and Parshas Va'era, and the stories which I want to share with you tonight. This past Shabbos wasn't just the Shabbos that followed the Alter Rebbe's passing, but it also blesses the upcoming month of Shvat. And the month of Shvat is the month which is the anniversary of passing the previous Rebbe, and on the same day, a year later, or more accurately, the next day, on the 11th of Shvat, a year later, 5711, the Rebbe accepted the leadership of the Jewish people. So the Alter Rebbe and the previous Rebbe and our Rebbe are all connected, and as we'll see, this is a highlight in this week's Torah portion of Va'era, and the stories that I wanted to share with you. The Alter Rebbe's name is Shnei Or. Shnei Or means two lights. And the simple reason why he was given that name, as the Baal Shem Tov said, when the Alter Rebbe was born, the Baal Shem Tov knew with divine inspiration that a new soul had been born, and he announced to his students that the name of the new soul is Shnei Or, two lights. And actually, a year before the Alter Rebbe was born, the Baal Shem Tov was already telling the students that a new soul is going to be born, and it's going to illuminate the world. And when the Alter Rebbe was born, the Baal Shem Tov said a new soul has come to the world, and it will illuminate the world with two lights: the light of the revealed parts of Torah and the light of the inner dimension of Torah. So, on the surface, the Alter Rebbe, what was unique about the Alter Rebbe, that he revealed both the revealed parts of Torah and the inner dimension of Torah. But it's actually deeper than that. The Alter Rebbe's name is two lights. That means that in one name, we have both lights. It's not that the Alter Rebbe has two names, one referring to the real parts of Torah, one referring to the inner dimension of Torah, but in the very same name, you have both lights, which means that the Alter Rebbe caused there to be something novel in the revealed parts of Torah and something novel in the inner dimension of Torah. The Alter Rebbe caused a convergence between them both, so that the way we approach the revealed parts of Torah is with the soul of the Torah, and the way we approach the soul of the Torah is also with the body and the exoteric parts of the Torah. What does that mean? So ordinarily, the revealed parts of the Torah, parts of the Torah which are which govern how we're supposed to behave, our behavior, ordinarily those parts of the Torah are about obedience. Do this, say this, think this. But unlike Maimonides and unlike Rav Yosef Karo, who also wrote works about how we are meant to behave, the Alter Rebbe introduced something new. In the Alter Rebbe's Code of Jewish Law, it also tells us the why. Why are you supposed to behave this way? So in addition to behavior, the Alter Rebbe brought in logic and reason. In a similar way, the inner dimension of Torah is something we usually associate with faith, because it's something which is otherworldly. And the Alter Rebbe and the Tanya, the Alter brought out the inner dimension of Torah to be something that we could understand logically through his path of Chabad, which means to understand, to integrate, to appreciate, to connect with. So it shouldn't just be something that's hidden and aloof, but something we can understand with our minds. So that's how the Alter Rebbe connected the revealed and inner dimension of Torah. So it shouldn't just be something, a matter of faith, but something that we could also have a geschmack, something we could also enjoy. This is also in this week's Torah portion. It begins with Hashem telling Moshe Rabbeinu that he's going to do these miracles for the Jewish people. And it begins with a criticism, it seems, of Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu that you question my ways. You question why I behave to the Jewish people in an unfair way. And you should know that the great leaders, the Jewish people before you, also dealt with difficult circumstances, and they did not question my ways. So on the surface, it's criticism, but we can't say it's simple criticism of Moshe Rabbeinu. Jewish law prescribes that it's you're not allowed to criticize Moshe Rabbeinu, and certainly Moshe Rabbeinu, as Maimonides says, the greatest of all men. So actually, what Moshe Rabbeinu did was something that he needed to do because of what his soul was meant to do, and it wasn't a pure criticism. Let me explain. Moshe Rabbeinu's soul is associated with Chachma Vatzilus, the highest level of godly revelation. But the highest level of godly revelation as connects to Hashem's wisdom. And the reason he was chosen for this task of redeeming the Jewish people was because the redemption from Egypt was meant to be a preparation for the giving of the Torah. The giving of the Torah is about godliness coming down into the parameters of the world, into the intellect, into the physical, into the world, into the lowest realm. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu was the one chosen for this task, not our forefathers, not Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because their path of serving Hashem was emotional, with their attributes of kindness and mercy and reverence. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, each emblematic of one of those three character traits, versus Moshe Rabbeinu, his attribute was associated with wisdom. And that's why he asked the question, because he was supposed to ask a question, as Hashem wanted him to bring the redemption from Egypt as preparation to receive the Torah when godliness will be revealed in the physical world, in the intellect. And therefore he's meant to ask, because he has to bring it down in the intellect. And God's response actually to Moshe Rabbeinu, I appeared to the patriarchs, and I did not let them know Yukevavke, and I did not reveal to them what I'm going to reveal to you. In Hashem's revelation to Moshe Rabbeinu, he actually was beginning this process of connecting the intellect with the supernatural, with the super rational. So on that note, in a similar way, there was a very noted Hasidic mentor named Reb Nissen Nemanov Al Vasham. Reb Nissen was at a Farbrengen of the previous Rebbe, and he shared something there with another Chassid whose name is Reb Yosef Gorevich from Eretz Yisrael. And he said the previous Rebbe shared this in the year Taf Reish Pei Hey, in 1925. Previous Rebbe shared an interesting thing. Most Hasidic discourses follow the style of the Alter Rebbe's discourses. The Alter Rebbe's discourses begin always, not always, but very often, with a question on the Torah portion, with analysis of the question on the Torah portion, and then it discusses a completely, seemingly not so related topic, related somewhat, and there are actually questions asked in the discourse that are not addressed by the discourse. In other words, it's so obvious sometimes that the point is not the questions because they aren't even answered in the discourse. Questions are asked and the questions are ignored. So the previous Rebbe explained the reason for this. He said that the questions that are asked in the beginning of a discourse are just a passport to get into the conversation discussing divine concepts, and explain why. When the world is naturally, the Hebrew word for world is concealment, and there's a sense of self, there's a sense of separation. When a Rebbe says a discourse of Hasidus, he's revealing godliness in the world. He's challenging the status quo of the world. He's revealing something. He's bringing God's presence in the world in a way that you could feel it. That's what is happening when a Rebbe says a discourse. I remember once I was with my grandfather visiting the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was saying a Hasidic discourse, unlike a regular talk where the Rebbe begins this first a song sung before, and everyone, I noticed that I was a little kid, everyone stood up, and my grandfather was telling me the Rebbe is saying a discourse. It's a Hasidic discourse, and it's a little bit different. It discusses deeper concepts. There's a song before that wraps his hand with a handkerchief. It's a whole otherworldly thing. So I said to my grandfather, so you probably feel like the Torah is being given at Mount Sinai right now. My grandfather looked at me and he said, "The Torah is being given at Mount Sinai right now. That's what's going on. That's what's happening." When the Rebbe says a discourse of Chassidus, he's revealing godliness in the world. So Hashem made the world in a way that zeh l'umah zeh. Whenever there's a new revelation of godliness, that's countered also by the forces of the opposite of holiness, contending with that revelation. And so, in order to sort of smuggle in this revelation, so it begins with an analysis in the Torah portion. It begins with questions and answers about the Torah portion to sort of like justify the conversation that we're not really just discussing a godly concepts. We're going into a logical analysis of the Torah portion. That's how the Rebbe begins the discourse. So the Alter Rebbe began many discourses with words of the Torah portion, and the Rebbe's following the Alter Rebbe follow the same pattern, and and most discourses are the intro, the heading of the discourse are words that the Alter Rebbe introduced. The final discourse of the previous Rebbe that he asked to be published on the day that he actually passed away begins with the words, "I have come to my garden." And that discourse has 20 chapters. And after the previous Rebbe's passing, the Rebbe pointed to this discourse as a sort of last will and testament of the previous Rebbe. And every single year, the Rebbe explained one chapter of this discourse for 20 years. And then again, for another 20 years, each year explaining another chapter. And so this year, for example, we're studying chapter 15 of this discourse. So the passport of the subject that our generation is categorized by is I've come to my garden. And as Rebbe explained in the very first discourse, that's because the role of our generation is to bring God's presence to be manifest in this physical world. For God to come into the garden, the world is called the Garden of Hashem, and our role in this, as a seventh generation from the Alter Rebbe, is to actually bring the godly revelation in a very physical way. So God should be revealed here in this physical world with the coming of Mashiach. Analogous to Moshe Rabbeinu, the seventh generation from Abraham, who brought the divine revelation in the physical world. There were 7 generations of sin from Adam until Abraham, and each generation caused God's presence to be more and more hidden. And then 7 generations of righteous people brought God's presence to be more and more revealed until Moshe Rabbeinu caused God's presence to be temporarily revealed with the giving of the Torah and with the tabernacle. And our generation is 7th from the Alter Rebbe, and our generation has a similar goal to eternally bring God's presence to be manifest in this world. So that's the theme of the discourse of our Rebbe's, if you will, hallmark discourse. I've come to my garden. So on that note, I wanted to share a few stories about this idea of connecting to the Rebbe and being steadfast in connecting to Hashem and bringing God's presence in the physical world. Just to open our hearts and minds a little bit, there was a Jew. This is not a story about the Rebbe, but it's a fascinating story, and it'll bring us somewhere. The previous Rebbe said that the reason why there's Judaism in Riga, Latvia, was because of a certain Jew whose name was Rabbi Yoel Branovich. Rabbi Yoel Branovich was a student of the Saba Navardik teacher who had a whole different path of serving Hashem, very different to Chassidus. But the previous Rebbe said about his student, Rabbi Yoel, he's a Yirei Shamayim Be'emes. He's truly someone who's God-fearing. And it's thanks to him that there's Judaism in Riga. So what does it mean to be truly God-fearing? So here's a story about him, and just opens up our hearts and minds to what a Jew is meant to be like. Rabbi Yoel Abranovich, he during World War I, he and his family had to leave Riga to go deeper into Russia, and they eventually lived in Petersburg. And while they were in Petersburg, they were suffering from disease, suffering from illness, and they really wanted to go back to their home in Riga. The issue was he had to have a special visa to return back during World War One, and Erbil's daughter, she had said the story herself. She shared the story, and she said that her she fainted several times because of the hunger. She actually fainted often because the things were so difficult. So her father eventually gets this visa, and they're ready and excited to go back home where things will be a lot easier. And then this guy comes to the house, dressed up in a very fancy suit, and he speaks to her father and her father's face pales. And her father comes into the house and he tells his family that this man who he had spoken to has a very serious problem. He is being investigated by the Bolsheviks, and the Bolsheviks want to put him in jail, and he needs this visa more than us because his life is in certain danger, and our lives are only in Safek Pekuach Nefesh. In halacha, it's called a doubt of our lives being in danger, but his life is definitely in danger. So he told his family, I decided to give him our visa. So his daughter said, I really hated that man. I hated that man. His man comes with his fancy suit, and we're suffering over there. And my father's like, no, he decided he's going to give him the visa because his life is in danger. Our life may or may not be in danger. His life is in certain danger. So that's what it means to be a Yireh Shamayim Be'emes, truly God-fearing, that you're not putting yourself first. You're thinking about the reality. So on that note, two more stories. These stories were shared by the same Rabbi Yosef Gurevich. Zalman. Okay. Actually, before we get into that story, just one more story. Just before I share the other two stories about the Rebbe. I heard a story today I have to share with you. I heard a story from Ezra Seru, here from Los Angeles. He was living then in Argentina, and he really wanted to visit the Rebbe. And to get a visa to see the Rebbe wasn't so easy. When you wanted to go from Argentina to New York, you had to have some paper, something to prove like that this is important, that you have a connection. And he just went into the American embassy and he said, I want to see the Rebbe. That's why I want to go to New York. And the the non-Jew in the embassy is like, I know who the Rebbe is, but you have to give us something. Give us a piece of paper. It's like, okay, when should I come back? Just come back tomorrow at 2:00. Tell them you want to see me. It's really unheard of in the world of embassies, and everyone knows it's not like just come back the next day and meet the same guy, but that's what happened. He got a letter from a Grunblatt, the Rebbe's emissary over there in Argentina. He comes back the next day and like, I have to meet this guy. His name is this. What? You have to meet this guy? Who are you? Anyways, he gets the letter. He manages to get a visa for 5 years. And he goes in 1987 to see the Rebbe. He comes to the Rebbe, and as anyone who's been to the Rebbe knows that the Rebbe's Farbrengens, between the Rebbe's talks, the Rebbe would nod with his head, and sometimes he would say L'chaim to each person, sometimes he would just nod with his head, nod with his head. Sometimes the Rebbe would say things to him, so to speak, to himself, as is known that tzaddikim, just by their uttering words, even if no one else hears, they accomplish something. Anyway, so the Rebbe speaks for a long time, and then there's a song. And he is holding his cup of wine, and more accurately, he said he was like so squeezed by everyone around him that he couldn't really like reach out and get a cup from somewhere. Some put a cup in his hand, some put wine in the cup, and he's waiting for the Rebbe to look at him so he could say L'chaim to the Rebbe. And finally, after 2 hours, he's holding this cup. He's not exaggerating, 2 hours. I know myself. I was by the Rebbe's Farbrengens. You could hold that cup for a long time. The Rebbe finished talking till the Rebbe saw you, till the Rebbe. He's holding the cup, and the Rebbe's looking at him, but the Rebbe's not moving his head to the next person. The Rebbe's looking at him and waiting. And his friend from Argentina elbows him, and he says, "Did you say a blessing?" It's like, no, I didn't say a blessing. Ah, so he said the blessing on the wine, and then the Rebbe shook with his head that you should say l'chaim. The Rebbe, how did the Rebbe know? How does the Rebbe know? The Rebbe is a Rebbe, but that's the story uh, as an intro to the two stories I wanted to share with you that I heard that was printed in the Krachbad magazine by Yosef Yitzchak Garevich from Israel. Shared these two stories that he saw himself firsthand. They both happened on Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah morning, he sees this Jew named Yosef Lifshitz, who just passed away recently, carrying a little girl, running to 770, and the Rebbe is walking to his place, and he runs over to the Rebbe, and he says to the Rebbe that basically what happened was that he got a few phone calls, and it's the holiday. You don't answer the phone on the holiday, but the phone kept on ringing, and he realized this was a serious thing. And who was on the line? Finally, he got someone to the non-Jew to answer the phone. Who was on the line? It was his uncle, his nephew, Reb Shalom Eichler, had swallowed a quarter, and he was it was affecting his breathing. He couldn't breathe properly, and so he's asking him, "Can you please go to the Rebbe and ask him for a blessing? His life is in danger." So he went to the Rebbe, and when he came to the Rebbe said, "Now is the time for this." So he says again, "Please, I need a blessing. This boy, his breathing is the doctors basically had a choice. One choice was to try to pull the coin out, the other was to push it further in. And either way was something that they didn't want to do because it could cause damage taking it out. It could affect the breathing worse by pushing it in. There was no really good solution. Didn't know what to do. So he asked the Rebbe a second time, and again the Rebbe said, "Now's the time for this." Simple. And he asked the Rebbe a third time, and the Rebbe and then the Rebbe said, "Amen, good news." And at that moment, Baruch Hashem, the coin was coughed out, and the boy was okay. That night, after Simchas Torah, the Rebbe was giving out wine as he always did after the holiday, wine for a blessing, and the boy came by with his father to the Rebbe, and immediately the Rebbe was giving out wine. He put this cup down and he said, with both hands, he said, "Now you feel better." And so that was the first story. What we've seen in the story is how this guy, he wanted to receive this blessing, and he didn't stop just because the Rebbe told him that wasn't the time. He kept on asking, and Rabbi Gorevich asked him, he said, "Why'd you keep on asking? The Rebbe himself is telling you it's not the time for it. Why'd you keep on asking?" So Rabbi Lifshitz said like this. He said, "I don't know I don't understand anything about the Rebbe, what the Rebbe says. I just know that I need to ask the Rebbe for a blessing and I need to receive a blessing. That's my job. And I know that this is someone's in danger. So I didn't think about myself, what I need to do, what I don't need to do, what the Rebbe should be saying, what he shouldn't be saying. I just know this boy's in danger. I need to get a blessing." And because of that, he persevered. Similar thing. It was also Simchas Torah, and the way it worked was the night of Simchas Torah during davening, there was one setup, and then when the Rebbe would dance for the hakafas, there was another setup, and they had to move the benches. They moved everyone around. There's a whole change in the setup in the shul in the 770, and one guy, he is holding on to a pole in the path of where the Rebbe was going to walk through. Anyone who has seen this, it looked like the parting of the Red Sea. The shul was so packed with people you couldn't even breathe hardly, and yet when the Rebbe would come by, somehow it looked miraculous. So just like people moved away, and there was room for the Rebbe to go by. So, but this guy wasn't going out of the way so that they could set up the synagogue. He was holding on to that pole, and everyone who had to set up the synagogue was trying to use brute force to get the guy off the pole. But this guy, he was heroic and he was holding on to that pole and not letting go. And the Rebbe came. And the Rebbe said, when a young man needs to go ask something, why is everyone trying to stop him? Let him come. So he goes over to the Rebbe, and what happened was he had a friend named Rabbi Treitel. Rabbi Treitel was married for 8 years without children, and he cared for his friend to have a blessing for children. And he went to the Rebbe and he said, "I want a blessing for Rabbi Treitel." And the Rebbe said, "There'll be good news this year. This year there'll be good news." And Baruch Hashem, that's when that year they had their first child. So again, it's the same idea where there is the rules, and in general, the Rebbe, didn't want people things should be very organized. And there's an order, but here is a situation where this guy didn't think about himself. He just was like, this guy needs a blessing. I need to reach out, and he held on to the pole. I mean, it's a superhuman strength the guy needed to have to be able to stand there and hold on to the pole when everyone's trying to get him off of there. But he cared so much, and that's why he was able to receive that blessing and connect to the Rebbe in a different way. And so too, ourselves, we have to leave the things that pull us away from the Rebbe behind and persevere and connect. Share one more story. I heard the story a few times, and honestly, the story is so fascinating that I wouldn't share it unless I knew the source of it. But today, I read the story with a very good source. The story was shared by the Tulner Rebbe. The Tulner Rebbe heard the story from the Gerer Rebbe. The Gerer Rebbe, the Pnei Menachem, had a very close relationship with the Rebbe as well. I heard myself, one of the Gerer Rebbe's Chassidim asked the Gerer Rebbe, the Pnei Menachem, "Are you Mashiach?" And the Gerer Rebbe said, "I'm not Tafshin Ayin. My father is not Tafshin Ayin." Which means I'm not, what's Tafshin Ayin? Tafshin Ayin is numerically equivalent to 770. I'm not 770, my father wasn't 770. Apparently that was his response to the identity of Mashiach. Anyways, so the Pnei Menachem said the following. He had a acquaintance, a chassid, who after World War II, he lost a little bit of his connection to Judaism, and he moved to New Zealand and he got into the fur business. As everyone knows, New Zealand, there's plenty of sheep there, and that's what he got into there. He got that business. And he had a sister living in Brooklyn, and he visited his sister. His sister lived in the same building that the Rebbe lived in, 346 Brooklyn Avenue. And when he visited his sister, he went in the elevator, and the Rebbe wasn't the Rebbe yet. It was the son-in-law of the previous Rebbe, who was called the Ramash at that time. He goes in the elevator with this guy. And in their short elevator conversation, the man tells the Rebbe that he's from New Zealand. And the Rebbe asks him, "Is there a mikveh in New Zealand?" And he says, "No." So the Rebbe said, "Well, that there needs to be an effort made, and someone like yourself could do that." And the guy, he wasn't really interested in Judaism at the time, and also he was only going there on business. It wasn't like his permanent residence, just doing there. It says, I don't only do business, just do business there, but that was a conversation. He moved to Israel. This Ger Chassid moved to Israel. When he moved to Israel, he became a lot closer to his roots, to Torah, and to his origin, to the Ger Chassid, and became again a Chassid of Pnei Menachem. 40 years later, he's in New York, and he decides to go visit the Rebbe. He hasn't seen the Rebbe since the 1940s. This is in 1989. In 1989, the Rebbe will give out dollars every Sunday, and he goes by the Rebbe, and the Rebbe gives him $1, and the Rebbe says, "What's going on with a mikveh in New Zealand?" And the guy was like completely shocked. Like, this was a continuation of the conversation 40 years before. He couldn't believe it. So the Pnei Menachem shared the story with the Tulner Rebbe. And the Pnei Menachem's comment on the story is like this. You think the most amazing thing about the story is that the Rebbe remembered a conversation. The guy looked different. The guy wasn't religious now, and he looked differently, and the Rebbe could tell who it was. He says, that's not amazing. The Rebbe is a tzaddik, and the Rebbe sees the soul. And it's the same soul. The Rebbe right away sees the soul. What the amazing thing is, what we don't realize, what the depth of the story is that it matters to the Rebbe that there should be a mikveh in New Zealand so much that it's not like recalling something that happened in the past. There's that need there, that real critical need that time stands still in the face of the need of a Jew to do a mitzvah from the perspective of a tzaddik. So that's eternal. That's beyond time. It's not just that the Rebbe sees the soul. It's that the Rebbe expresses this idea as basi lagani, that our reality of who we are in this world is just about revealing Hashem's presence here. We're here as a Jew in this world is meant to bring Hashem's presence to the world through a mitzvah, through a Torah, and therefore it doesn't matter everything else that happened. A lot of things happen, but why you're here is a mikvah, has a mikvah been built in New Zealand. So none of us on this Zoom over here with me are from New Zealand, but we all have our mitzvahs we need to take care of, and we have to realize that we can do it. To hold steadfast to Bas Lagani, to the goal of why the soul's here, and that the seventh generation, our generations, to bring Hashem's presence to be manifest in the world, and at this special time, blessing the month of Shvat, the month of the anniversary of passing the previous Rebbe, the month of when our Rebbe became Rebbe. It's a month when Hashem endows us to have a stronger connection to the tzaddik, to our Rebbe, and to be more in sync to who we are, be'emes, who we really are. L'chaim, l'chaim. A good tevach, a freilich tevach. Any questions or comments? Good tevach, Rebaruch, good tevach, Rebaruch Nufel, good tevach, Menchayel, good tevach, Hayesar, good tevach, Reb David, good tevach, Reb Yosef.
Thank you. Shvuah Tov.